A stranger left an envelope in my mailbox. So, I honestly don't even know how to start this without sounding completely insane. But I guess that's the charm of Reddit, right? You post something wild and either people call you crazy or someone out there says, yeah, that happened to me too. My name's Emily Carter. I'm 27. I live in a quiet little neighborhood where the biggest drama most weeks is whether Mrs. Langley down the street will yell at kids for stepping on her lawn. I freelance as a graphic designer, which basically means I spend most of my time in front of my laptop in leggings, surviving off coffee and late night DoorDash orders. My mom, Sarah, lives about 15 minutes away. She worries about me being alone too much, but honestly, I like the quiet, or at least I used to, because 3 months ago, my quiet life got turned completely upside down by something as stupid as an envelope. It was a Tuesday night, nothing unusual. I had wrapped up a boring project for a client who couldn't decide if they wanted their logo slightly bluer or slightly less blue. I remember laughing at how pointless it all felt, then heading downstairs to take out the trash. That's when I saw it. My mailbox was mostly empty, just a coupon booklet and some junk mail, but tucked in the back was a plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address, just my name, Emily, written in this weird, rushed handwriting. At first, I thought it was from a neighbor. Maybe Alex, my childhood best friend, was messing with me again. He's the type to tape a dumb, you owe me coffee note to my door if I forgot to meet him. But this handwriting wasn't his. It wasn't my mom's either. I stood there on the porch for a good minute just staring at it. For some reason, it made my chest feel tight. Like opening it was a decision I couldn't undo. But of course, curiosity won. Inside was a single piece of paper. No signature, no fancy words. Just one line. You don't know me, but I know you. Check under the third loose floorboard in your bedroom. Yeah, exactly the type of note you'd expect in the opening scene of a Netflix thriller. My first instinct was, this is a joke. Had to be. Maybe Alex, maybe some bored kid in the neighborhood. But then I realized something who else even knew about the loose floorboard. When I was 13, I dropped a book in my room and one of the boards near my bed shifted weirdly. I'd pried it up and found a little hollow space beneath. It was empty back then and I'd always meant to tell my mom about it, but I never did. I just kind of forgot, so how would anyone else know? That's when the paranoia kicked in. I remember setting the paper down on my nightstand and pacing. My brain was screaming, don't touch it, don't check, call someone first, but my hand had already grabbed a screwdriver. The floorboard came up easier than I expected. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the creak of wood, and underneath, there really was something, a dusty old metal box, maybe the size of a shoebox. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I don't know how long I sat there just staring at it, my palms sweating. I actually laughed nervously out loud because part of me thought, what if this is some horror movie shit and I just unleashed a curse? But eventually, I slid it out and pried it open. Inside were photographs, receipts, a smaller sealed envelope. The photographs were what hit me first, my dad's face staring up at me. Michael Carter. Except, here's the thing, my dad's been dead for 15 years. He died when I was 12. Car accident. At least that's what I was always told. My memories of him are fuzzy Saturday morning pancakes. His laugh when I spilled juice on his work papers once. The way he tucked me in at night. But after the accident, Mom shut down whenever I asked questions. We never visited the crash site, never got much closure. I learned not to push. And yet, here he was in photos that clearly weren't from my childhood. One picture showed him standing outside a diner I didn't recognize. His hair was a little grayer, his clothes more worn, but it was definitely him. Another was of him at what looked like a bus stop. And another, this one made my stomach drop, was timestamped 3 years after his death. I actually dropped the stack of photos onto the floor and just sat there shaking. The receipts didn't make sense either. Gas stations, random stores, some kind of hardware shop. Dates ranging from when I was a teenager up until 5 years ago. Finally, I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a wad of cash, maybe $2,000, all in 20s and another note. They're watching. Don't trust anyone. At that point, I swear I almost passed out. My body felt ice cold. My hands numb. I don't know how long I sat there staring at everything, but eventually I shoved it all back into the box, sealed it, and slid it under my bed. My brain was spinning. Who put this here? Why now? Was my dad actually alive? Who the hell is they? And most importantly, who left that first envelope in my mailbox? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me jump. At one point, I thought I saw someone standing under the streetlight across the road, but when I blinked, they were gone. By morning, I looked like death warmed over. My mom called around 10 a.m. asking if I was coming over for lunch, and I almost told her everything, but something stopped me. That second note echoed in my head. Don't trust anyone. So I lied, said I was swamped with work. Instead, I called Alex. Okay, Em, he said when I told him a sanitized version, just that I found weird stuff under my floorboard. You realize this sounds like one of those creepypasta stories, right? Next, you're gonna tell me your mirror's haunted. I laughed, but it was hollow. I'm serious. There was stuff. Pictures of my dad. Silence, then softer. Em, your dad's been gone a long time. Yeah, I know. My throat was tight. But these weren't old pictures. Alex didn't laugh that time. He just sighed and said, all right, I'll come by tonight. Don't freak out alone, okay? I agreed, but all day I couldn't stop thinking about that box under my bed. And the more I thought about it, the more one terrifying realization hit me. If someone left that envelope in my mailbox, it meant they knew where I lived. And if they knew about the floorboard, they probably knew me a lot better than I was comfortable with. And that's where it all started. With one stupid envelope that pulled me into a rabbit hole I still haven't crawled out of. But that night, that first discovery, that was the moment my life stopped being normal. Because as much as I wanted to believe this was some elaborate prank, deep down, I knew someone was watching me and they wanted me to know it. When you find a thing that breaks the veneer of ordinary life, a strange envelope, a hidden box, your dead father's face in pictures dated years after his death, you expect one of two things to happen next. Either you run to someone and everything gets sorted out, or you spiral deep into paranoia and become the person everyone calls unstable. I guess I thought I'd choose the first option. I rarely chose well when forced to pick between logic and fear. So, sensible Emily would have taken the box straight to the police and said, "Here, these are photos of my father and also a note that says they're watching. Please help." Instead, I did what a lot of people do when something big and weird lands at their feet. I half believed it was nothing and half hoped someone else would make it a problem for me. I called Detective Harris. He was the kind of cop you picture in small towns, practical, a little world-weary, and allergic to melodrama. I spoke to him on the phone and told him the barest version of events. I found an envelope, there was a box, there were photos. I left out the part about the cash. I left out the part about the note that said, "Don't trust anyone." That last line was somehow my private scarlet letter, and I couldn't bring myself to hand it over to a stranger. Harris listened for 42 seconds. I counted. "You sure you didn't get this from someone you know? Prank, maybe?" He asked finally, voice clip, like he was already thinking about his paperwork. "I don't think so," I said. "Who would know about the floorboard?" "Anyone with a metal detector and too much time," he said with a faint snort. "Look, Miss Carter, I've got reports about actual crimes, actual victims. If you want, you can bring the box down to the station. We'll catalog it and put it in evidence. But I'll be honest, people bring odd stuff in all the time. If there's no sign of a crime, we can't do much." It was the shrug of the state bundled into a voice. Practical, efficient, also the kind of response that felt like being put back into the normal world and slammed with the lid of the cover-up. He wasn't dismissive because he didn't care. He was dismissive because systems are designed to ignore things that don't immediately bleed. I could feel myself shrinking into the shape of that dismissal, a weird domestic anomaly rather than something worth investigating. After the call, I sat on my couch and stared at the box under the coffee table like it might sprout legs and walk away. Part of me wanted to run to my mother and throw the pictures on the table and say, "Tell me everything." Part of me wanted to call Alex and let him run all the detective-y things I was too terrified to do. I ended up doing both in very measured doses. Mom Sarah. I called first. She answered with the slow, comforting tone she always used, like a balm. "Hey, baby, everything okay? You sounded weird this morning." I almost told her, then stopped. My voice cracked when I said, "I found something." That seemed dramatic. She asked softly if I needed her to come over, and then there was that thing I learned after Dad died. Whenever I asked about him, her words became careful pebbles in a pond. She would deflect or cry or change the subject. I didn't want to make her cry, I wanted answers. So I lied. "I'll be fine," I said. "Maybe later." After I hung up, I called Alex. Alex Walker, the one who'd known me since we both had scraped knees and science fair projects that exploded. He had the "I'll be there" energy that my life lacked. He also had a reporter's itch. He loved a mystery the way some people love sports. When I told him the quieter, spookier version, the floorboard, the photos, the line on the other end went suspiciously still before he said, "Bring it to me. Don't throw it away. Don't show Mom yet." "Why not her?" I asked. "She deserves to know." "She does. But if it's something weird and linked to your dad, the last thing I want is your mom spiraling because of some..." He stopped. Didn't finish the sentence, and I could hear him picking at the cap of his pen even through the phone. "Just bring it to me. I'll look at the receipts and the timestamps and whatever." 2 hours. 2 hours felt like forever. I busied myself with nonsense. I cleaned the kitchen counter obsessively. I refreshed the same newsfeed until the articles started to blur together. I told myself I should be grateful for how small and breathable my life had been, until an envelope arrived to ruin it. When Alex arrived that evening, he didn't joke. He sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out like a mini command center, phone nearby, laptop humming. He looked like someone who'd been waiting his whole life for a case that smelled faintly of conspiracy. "Show me everything," he said. I got the box and unfolded the photos like a priest revealing relics. Alex's expression changed subtly when he saw Michael's face. He didn't look surprised, more like he'd been waiting for confirmation that something in Emily Carter's life was not as it seemed. "These dates are weird," he said, flipping through. He pointed to a corner of one photo where a faint number had been stamped. October 17th, 2016. That's 5 years after the accident. "What if it's a misprint?" I offered, because my brain was a coward and wanted easy explanations. Alex didn't bite. "Possible," he said, "but you also have receipts dated after that. And see this? A hardware store receipt from a town 3 counties away. Different states of wear on the photos. Some look older, some look more recent. Your dad's photo here? That's not a burial photo. That's a guy living under a different name, maybe." Living under a different name? My throat felt hollow. I wanted to scream at the universe to stop rearranging the furniture of my life. Alex rubbed his forehead. "Okay, so 2 options. 1, Your dad didn't die when you were told. 2. Someone moved around old photos and receipts to make it look like he didn't die. Both are big, both are weird. Let's start small. Where's this hardware store? He tapped the receipt. The address was printed faintly at the bottom. Hartsfield, Hardware, 92 Maple Kessler, small town. So, I asked. So we go there, Alex said. We ask questions. We check if they remember selling to your dad or someone like him. Maybe someone who worked with your dad left stuff there. Or maybe it's nothing, but at least we ruled it out. This is where the sensible part of me would have argued for caution. The part of me that loved the rhythm of puzzle solving pushed back. I wanted to know. I wanted to fold the ragged edges of this mystery into a neat rectangle and understand it. The cash in the smaller envelope felt like a bribe and a lifeline at the same time. The note that said, "They're watching," hummed like an electric warning below everything. We left the box on my dining table and drove out to Kessler the next morning. It's funny places feel different when you're looking for a particular thing in them. The hardware store was the same worn place it had been the whole time I'd driven past it in movies and commute laps of my imagination. Faded, open sign, weather-stained boards, the kind of jingly bell that still announced customers. Behind the counter stood a man in a shirt with a name tag that said, Jim. He had the patient, slightly baffled look of someone who'd been asked to explain houses to a ghost. "Can I help you?" he asked. He looked at Alex first, then at me, like two halves of a question. I handed him the receipt. He squinted when he saw the date. "It's an old receipt, miss. Where'd you find this?" "Under a floorboard," I said, because refusing to say it felt like refusing to exist. Jim's eyes flicked over to Alex. "Mr. Walker?" he asked. Alex nodded. I noticed, not for the first time, how Alex's presence made people open up. He has that effect, like his curiosity is gently prosecutorial. Jim led us to the back of the shop where the community memory lived, in the form of piles of invoices and an ancient ledger bound with twine. "We get folks buying all sorts of stuff," Jim said. "But if you're asking if someone named Michael Carter bought a lot of hardware here around 2017, no, not that name. Maybe another name. We had a fella who came in sometimes, kept to himself, bought calipers and some bolts, had a scar over his eyebrow, wore a cheap coat even in summer. You could be thinking of him." The scar detail made my gut flip. My dad had a scar over his eyebrow from a childhood skateboard incident. Was that memory helping or hurting? Was I searching for my dad in strangers and finding him because I wanted to? Alex watched Jim carefully, like a hawk watching for mouse habits. He asked if the ledger had any handwriting that matched the receipts. Jim flipped through pages and eventually pulled out a scrap of paper with a different handwriting, similar slanted loops and hurried downstrokes. It could have been coincidence, or maybe not. "This looks like the same kind of handwriting," Alex said, pointing. Jim shrugged. "Lots of scribblers around here. If you're serious, there's an abandoned house on the outskirts of town, the old Mercer place. Folks say people used to go in and out of it odd hours. Might be a stretch, but if someone was hiding, that kind of place attracts those looking." So we went. Abandoned house is a phrase that has its own cinematic energy. The Mercer house did not disappoint. It sat like a rumor on the edge of Kessler. Peeling paint, sagging porch, overgrown ivy clinging to its ribs. We parked without making too much noise, and I felt the hair on my arms prick. Alex clicked his phone into camera mode, but didn't make a sound. I carried the memory box under my arm like contraband. We went inside through a back window, because that's what you do in stories when you want to not be seen by nosy neighbors. The floorboards complained under our weight, old thin wood that had sucked in generations of storms. It smelled of damp paper and rust and an old, sweet perfume that I can't place. The kitchen had a stack of yellowed newspapers. The living room had a couch that had given up on holding up its cushions. On a small table, mostly hidden under dust and an overturned lamp, was a stack of papers tied with twine. My heart did something like a small animal trying to escape its cage. I set the memory box down and reached for the twine. Inside were journals, loose pages with diagrams, technical scribbles, and, my breath snagged, handwriting I knew, like the outline of my own face. Michael's handwriting. Little slashes through words, impatient loops. Some pages had dates. Some had a phrase written in block letters at the top of a page. Project Echo. I remember the way my hands trembled as I turned pages. There were lists, names blacked out with ink, diagrams of rooms, notes about signal interference, and an entry that began, "If they come, tell Emily," and then it stopped. Something had been cut off, torn out. I wanted to scream, or cry, or both. Instead, I thumbed through pages to find things that would make sense. One page was different, taped to the inside of the journal, a small printout of a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local Research Lab under scrutiny after missing employee reports." The date was older, but the lab's name was there, blurred, the same letters I'd seen on one of the receipts in the memory box. Another page was a different flavor of horror, a list of numbers and what looked like coordinates. Alex read over my shoulder and said quietly, "This is not small. This is a whole thing." We spent hours at the Mercer house, poring through papers like archaeologists who had found something that would make people uncomfortable. There were references to people who had been relocated, and notes that sounded like someone trying to keep a secret from collapsing. There were signatures that I didn't recognize and initials that repeated, RH kept appearing across multiple documents. The more pages I turned, the more the name seared into my skin. RH, I didn't know the name yet, but I would learn it later as Richard Hale, the kind of man whose name could slide into headlines and never look back. For that afternoon, it was just two initials that felt like the edge of a blade. When we left the Mercer place, I felt untethered. I wanted to call my mother and say, "Look what I found. Look, it's all linked. Tell me you didn't know." But I didn't. Every time I imagined telling her, I watched her shrink back like a movie playback of how she'd been around Dad's memory, an involuntary defense mechanism that protected her from grief and secrets. I couldn't dismantle her scaffolding for the possibility that her husband had been something complicated or worse, in danger. Instead, I kept the journals in my apartment under lock and key in a drawer and told Alex we'd go through them slowly. He promised not to tell anyone until we had something solid. He promised to be careful. We became conspirators in a way that felt exhilarating and wrong. The watching began to be less abstract after that. Before I found the journals, their watching had been an ominous sentence. After the Mercer house, it became a weather pattern. I noticed the same dark sedan a few blocks away for 2 days in a row, always at the same stoplight, engine idling, headlamp like an unblinking eye. There was a man at the corner who pretended to read a newspaper, but whose head tilted toward my building whenever I stepped outside. Sometimes there were phone calls in the middle of the night with silence on the other end. Once, I came home and found the light on in my living room even though I had turned everything off. Swat. The man who watched me up close was not the same as the faceless engine at the stoplight. He was taller than I expected, mid-40s, with a ridge of gray at his temple and a face that could have belonged to any neighbor until you noticed the way he paid attention not to my face. Exactly, but to my patterns. He would stand at a distance, hands in his coat pockets, like someone who'd been told to look normal but couldn't quite manage it. I tried to catch him looking directly at me once. He didn't flinch. He simply lifted his hand in a small, almost apologetic nod and then walked away. It was weird and unnerving and, somehow, human. Not a predator in this moment. More like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. I asked Alex if he could follow him. Alex refused. "Follow him and you become a target, Em," he said, not unkindly. "And also, you're letting your paranoia pick the script. We need facts, not stares." I nodded because Alex was right and then went home and sat on the edge of my bathtub and had an ugly, embarrassed cry. It's hard to be brave when your bones feel like sand. It's harder when the person who is supposed to be your protector is a photograph that doesn't obey dates. The next morning, a man called me. He didn't give his name. He told me not to go any further. His voice was calm and flat. "You're meddling," he said. "You don't know what you've touched. Leave it buried." "Who are you?" I asked, because the audacity of being spoken to like that, like a troublesome child, made my neck hot. "You don't want to know," he said. Then he hung up. I stared at my phone until it felt like my eyes would fall out. I thought of the note in the smaller envelope. "They're watching. Don't trust anyone." I thought of the man at the stoplight, the man with the gray at his temple, who watched like a man with a ledger open in his mind. I thought of my mother, who folded herself into protective shapes when my father's name came up. I finally told her. I went to her house like a guilty teenager and left the journals on her kitchen table like a confession. I wanted to see how she would react. I wanted to find a crack into her silence. I wanted to see my father reflected in her face. She looked at the papers, at the handwriting, at the word Project Echo, stitched across a page like a brand. Her face went pale in stages, like someone watching a distant storm move toward them. She picked up a photograph I'd left on the kitchen island, a photo of my father at a bus stop. She traced the line of his jaw with a finger that trembled. "Where did you get these?" she asked finally. "Under a floorboard," I said. "In my room." She made a sound that was equal parts anger and grief. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she demanded. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you always—" I started and then I stopped. "Because you never told me anything? Because I was a kid and the world told me stories instead of facts? Because I wanted to believe the neat version of my life? All of those things were true and none of them were safe to say aloud." Sarah folded in on herself in that familiar, protective way. "Your father—" she began and stopped every sentence before it completed, like someone reading a sentence too painful to finish. "Finally," she said in a voice without inflection, "Michael was not just the man you remember. He got involved in things. Dangerous things. We tried to get him help. We thought we did the right thing." My stomach dropped. "Help with what? What are you saying?" She looked at me as if weighing whether honesty would break me. And then she did what she'd done my whole life. She gave me a sliver of truth and wrapped it in caution. "He worked on a project. It was secret. He said it was about signals and communications. He was worried people would misuse it. We feared the company. We thought if we guarded quiet, we could protect ourselves." "You mean—" I felt like the floor under me had become one of those Hollywood trapdoors. "You mean he was trying to blow the whistle?" "I don't know what he called it then," she said. "All I know is one day he left and said he had to go somewhere for work and then—" Her voice cracked. "He didn't come back. And you never told me?" The words were too sharp. I hadn't meant for them to be. The anger that leapt up was real and raw, a teenager's brand reopening after 15 years. "I wanted to protect you," she said simply. "I wanted to keep you from knowing that the man who loved you might have been complicated. I thought ignorance would protect you. It didn't. I see that now. It was a terrible, honest thing she said. Ignorance as armor. I wanted to hit her and hug her and shake the answers out of her all at once. Instead, I sat. I listened to her admit the unadmitted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had permission to be angry about being kept small. After that, she closed down again. She refused to talk about names. She refused to look at dates. She refused to answer questions about whether she'd ever known of anyone watching us. She made tea and told me to sleep. Her reticence was both shield and snare. She had given me a keyhole and then slammed the door. That afternoon, Alex came by with coffee and a camera, and we made a plan. We would catalog. We would take photos. We would cross-reference dates. We would not tell mom more than we had to. We would also be careful, no dramatic confrontations, no obvious social media posts. We would be quiet and methodical. Adult detectives, not the adrenaline-charged protagonists who drive into danger without a second thought. I slept badly that night, and when I woke up, the sedan at the stoplight was gone. The man with the gray at his temple did not appear. For a day, I breathed easier. Then I opened the journal again and found a folded page tucked between entries, a note in handwriting I recognized that read, "If you find this, follow the coordinates. It's the only way you'll see the full picture." It was a breadcrumb, an invitation, a dare. And somewhere behind my ribs, a small, stubborn, furious voice had lit a match. I was done pretending this could be solved by silence. The envelope had yanked me out of ordinary life, and now the only forward route was into the dark it had exposed. So I tucked the journals into a bag, texted Alex the coordinates, and tried not to notice the way my hands felt like ice. You know how in scary movies, the main character ignores all the obvious warnings, the creepy sounds, the don't go in there signs, the stranger telling them to stop poking around? Yeah, that's me now. I've become the dumb girl in the horror movie who everyone yells at through the screen. And the worst part, I know it. I know I should stop, but I can't. Because once you've seen something you're not supposed to see, there's no unseeing it. I'd been seeing him for days before he finally approached me. This man, tall, maybe mid-40s, broad-shouldered, but not sloppy. Always dressed in plain clothes, faded jeans, a dark jacket, sometimes a baseball cap pulled low. The kind of guy you wouldn't notice in a crowd, except he wasn't in a crowd. He was always just there. Across the street when I left for groceries, standing near the bus stop when I grabbed coffee, parked in a car 2 houses down, with the engine running when I got home. At first, I thought I was paranoid. My brain was already fried from the box, the photos, the journals, the goddamn Project Echo papers I couldn't make sense of. But then one night, I was sitting at my desk and I looked out the window and there he was, under the street lamp, just standing, staring at my house. That was the moment I knew I wasn't imagining it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time my eyes closed, I pictured him creeping up my stairs, breaking into my room, dragging me away. So when it finally happened, when he finally approached me, I thought it was the end. It was late afternoon. I just left Alex's place after spending hours ranting to him about the receipts and the abandoned house we'd found. He still thought I was losing it, but at least he humored me enough to check things out. I walked back toward my car, keys in hand, and there he was, leaning against my car like he'd been waiting all day. My stomach dropped to the ground. "Emily Carter?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, too calm. "Get away from me," I snapped, fumbling with my phone. "I'm not here to hurt you." He raised his hand slightly, like he was surrendering. "But you need to stop. Stop digging. Stop chasing. You don't know what you're walking into." Every instinct told me to run, but my legs were cement. "Who the hell are you?" He hesitated. Then Daniel Cross. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, like it should mean something, sent a shiver down my spine. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stay alive," he said simply. "Your father..." He cut himself off and shook his head. "It doesn't matter. None of it matters if you keep doing this. You'll end up like him. Like him. Like Michael Carter, dead." I don't know how long I stared at him before I managed to spit out, "Why should I believe you?" Daniel's eyes softened in a way that made me even more uneasy. "You shouldn't, but you should believe this. They're already watching you. And once they decide you're a problem, there's no going back." Then he stepped away, shoved his hands into his pockets, and walked down the street like we just discussed the weather. And me? I collapsed into my car and drove straight home, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. That night, I found another envelope in my mailbox. This one was heavier. Inside was a single key and a printed set of coordinates. Nothing else. I googled the coordinates. They pointed to a storage facility on the edge of town. I almost laughed like, of course. Of course it's a storage unit. Where else would secret files and answers be hiding? It was straight out of a cliché thriller. But here's the thing. Daniel's warning replayed in my head, louder and louder. "Stop digging. You'll end up like him." And yet I went anyway. Because if I didn't, I knew I'd never forgive myself. The storage facility was one of those long, sprawling rows of metal doors, all identical, all painted dull blue. The kind of place you could stash old furniture or apparently evidence of a decades-long conspiracy. The key fit into unit hash 47. When I pulled the door open, a rush of cold, stale air hit my face. Dust swirled in the beam of my phone's flashlight. Inside were stacks of cardboard boxes, some labeled, most not. I crouched down and opened the nearest one. Inside, newspaper clippings, dozens of them. Reports of missing people, some local, some from other states. The names meant nothing to me, But one word scrawled across multiple headlines did: echo. Another box held binders stuffed with technical reports, charts, graphs, strange diagrams of machines I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted as I flipped through them. Most were stamped with the logo of Hale Dynamics. Richard Hale, the name that had popped up in my father's notes, the powerful CEO with government contracts and more money than God. And then I found the box that almost made me scream. Inside were papers covered in my father's handwriting. Michael Carter's. The handwriting I hadn't seen in 15 years. His notes were frantic, disorganized. References to subjects, trials, unethical protocols, mentions of Hale's name, mentions of cover-ups, of threats, and over, the same phrase underlined: Project Echo. I felt my knees go weak. My dad wasn't some random victim of a car accident. He'd been in the middle of something huge, something dangerous, something that had killed people. I sat there, surrounded by boxes of his ghost, when I heard it. Footsteps. Not faint, not distant. Close, just outside the unit. My whole body froze. My phone's light flickered against the walls, the beam shaking with my trembling hands. Another step, then another. I slammed the box shut, grabbed a handful of papers, and killed my flashlight. The footsteps stopped. For a full 30 seconds, I didn't breathe. I pressed myself against the cold metal wall, heart beating so loudly I swore it would give me away. Then a whisper of movement, like someone brushing against a row of units. I didn't wait to find out who it was. I bolted. I sprinted out of the unit, slammed the door down, and ran straight to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was home, with the door locked, chest heaving, papers still clutched in my shaking hands. And when I finally dared to look at them, my blood ran cold. Because one of the documents wasn't just about Project Echo. It had my father's name, his signature, and next to it, Richard Hale's. That was the night everything became real. No more, maybe I'm paranoid. No more, maybe this is just a prank. No, this was real. My father had been tied to Hale Dynamics. He'd tried to stop something, and he'd been silenced. And now, someone wanted me to uncover what he couldn't. But whoever left that envelope, I wasn't the only one they were watching. Because out there in the dark, in those footsteps I heard, was proof. Someone else had been there, and they didn't want me to leave alive. If you ever want to know exactly what panic smells like, don't ask some poetic novelist come to my tiny kitchen at 2 a.m, the night after you learn your father's signature is on corporate documents that read like a murder warrant. Panic smells like burnt coffee you forgot you made, like printer ink and dust, like the stale plastic of old cassette tape cases when you open them, and the air around them tastes suddenly like time. Panic smells like every cardboard box you shoved under your bed and never meant to look at again. We started with the journals. Alex and I had them spread across the dining table like we were trying to map a constellation. There were post-its and scrap paper, a stack of photos that had once made sense in someone else's life, and a stainless steel mug that had a crack down the handle. Outside, the neighborhood hummed normal things, someone's TV on too loud, Mrs. Langley's TV narration over the hedges, and inside, the world we'd been living in was quietly collapsing. I'm telling you, Alex said, tapping a page with the tip of his pen like it was a co-conspirator. He used shorthand, but he has patterns. See here? When he wanted to emphasize a name, he underlined twice. When he was angry, he wrote in block letters. When he was dodging a subject, the words get smaller. He smiled with that weird, concentrated smile he gets when he thinks he's about to find treasure. He sounded almost giddy. I hated him a little for it. The giddiness, not the discovery. It's a terrible thing to feel when your father's life is the prize. The coded entries were maddening at first. They were a collage of half-sentences, arrows, dates, and things that looked like technical shorthand from someone who spent all their time inside labs and server rooms. There were symbol clusters, then sudden, almost childlike notes. Stop. Burn this. Tell Sarah nothing. If Emily reads, and then a jagged tear where a line had been ripped clean out. Look, Alex said, sliding over a page. He used a date cipher, right? He'd put a date, then subtract a number he wrote in the margin. It's idiosyncratic but consistent, like someone inventing a lock and then leaving you the key. It took us 2 days and too much stale coffee and one very patient YouTube tutorial on basic ciphers. But once we had the method, the pages started coughing up secrets. Michael Carter had been trying to make sense of Project Echo. He had been following people, cataloging anomalies. He had been tracking conversations and occurrences and then mapping them to names that were blacked out in ink. He wrote about trial phases and human subjects and used phrasing that made my stomach twist. Unwitting participants, data harvested without consent, behavioral anomalies post-exposure, suppression orders from HQ. I read one passage and felt the room tilt. They told me it was telemetry. It was telemetry until I saw the faces. We were told it would tune interference. We were told it would make networks more efficient. I watched them test on the factory crew, then on volunteers. They weren't volunteers. They were people who answered ads. Participate in cognitive study, compensation provided. We tracked the changes. Mr. Hale's name is attached to funding. There are memos. I have copies. If I'm gone, Emily, find Evelyn Ross. Trust Evelyn with caution. My mouth went dry. Alex looked at me as if he'd seen through to the marrow. He was trying to blow this up, he said. He gathered proof. He thought someone would listen. Who is Evelyn Ross? I asked. I felt a weight in my belly like something heavy had been dropped there. I'll find her, Alex said. He said it like he always did. Fierce, competent. the way he'd been at 12 when he promised to help me win every school project. I believed him. I had to. We found Evelyn faster than I expected. She found us, really. She emailed Alex a week later, terse, just a line that said, "If you are looking into Project Echo, stop. I can help. Meet at the Blue Lantern Tuesday, 6 p.m. She used Alex's email, not mine. That told me something. She wanted to control the initial contact, perhaps to avoid my mother being dragged into anything, or maybe to test how cautious we were. The Blue Lantern was a bar that tried to be low-lit and mysterious and mostly succeeded because it smelled like old wood and lemon oil. I sat in the dented booth with my fingers worrying the rim of my glass. Alex watched the door like it was a Stargate. At 6:12, a woman slid into the seat opposite me, like she'd been there from the beginning, though we'd only seen her for a stretch in the journals. Evelyn Ross was in her late 30s, I guessed, with perceptive eyes and the posture of someone used to carrying invisible burdens. She had a folder tucked to her chest like a shield. Her voice was a rasp, like a cigarette that had given up and become a story. "You must be Emily," she said. She said my name with care, like she wasn't sure if it belonged to a person or a case file. "How do you know my name?" I asked before Alex could. "I helped Michael," she said, and the booth went cold. "Not directly. I was on Project Echo's data team, not on the trials. I handled analytics. When I figured out what they were doing," she laughed once, that dry, humorless laugh. "I couldn't stay. I left evidence in places Michael would find." She tapped the folder, the envelopes, the boxes in storage. I tried to see the truth where someone would see it. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, voice a notch higher than I meant. "Because they're closing ranks," she said. "Hale is consolidating. People who pride too close disappear or get ruined. Michael started asking too many questions. I thought I could outpace them by moving evidence. I thought if someone like him found it, he could finish what I started." Her eyes flicked to mine. "I'm the one who left the envelope in your mailbox." A hot, sudden betrayal rose in me. You put my life at risk. "I put information where someone might find it," she said very patiently. I didn't expect them to watch you. I didn't expect him to be alive in the paperwork." There was something like guilt under her words, like she could see my face and wished the map of her intentions were clearer. "Why Michael?" I asked. The question had been coiled in my chest since I found the first photo. "Why him? He was the kind of man who could triangulate data," Evelyn said softly. "He had a knack for pattern recognition. If anyone could make sense of the chaos, it was him. He had access too. He could slip into places that would make the rest of us invisible. He also had a conscience." She said the last 3 words slowly, as if testing them in the air between us. A part of me wanted to scream, "Where is he? Was he killed? Did he run? Who did this to him?" But Evelyn beat me to it. "He didn't die in an accident," she said. The words were a flat stone, dropping into a still pond. "You already found papers that suggest as much." There was a coordinated silencing. "I don't have enough to point finger. Not yet. I have enough to say he tried to expose them. I have tapes." "Tapes?" I whispered. The word hit like a small bell. "Yes," she said, pulling from her folder a clamshell case with cassettes inside. "I archived copies of what Michael recorded. He knew his notes wouldn't be enough. He started taping. He started to speak to a recorder as if he were writing to someone. A testament. He left them in storage. I kept a set." My hands went cold. The kitchen table, the journals, the fold of paper we called evidence, suddenly everything had a voice. Evelyn's cassette player was old, a brick from the 90s. She found a set of batteries in her purse and clicked a cassette into place. The first tape was labeled in Michael's handwriting. It found Emily. My body felt like glass. Alex put his hand over mine. It was a human anchor. The tape hissed like the ocean, and then my father's voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. Gravel nice and tired. It said, in a voice that made me rediscover what grief is in real time, "If you're hearing this, they failed to silence me, but they will try to silence you." Every sentence was a touchstone. His voice explained how he'd discovered anomalies, how Project Echo had used telco nets and behavioral algorithms to create stimuli that would, over time, condition subjects. He named names carefully, then cut himself off. He said things about being followed, about being threatened. He whispered into the tape, "If anything happens to me, Emily, find Evelyn. Trust cautiously." When the tape ended, the room was small and made of edged glass. I was shaking. Alex looked like he'd aged a decade. "That means he knew he could die," I said. The truth dropped into the table like a coin. "He planned for me to find this." "He hoped you wouldn't," Evelyn corrected softly. "He hoped to stay alive long enough to finish it himself. But he prepared." She tapped the cassette. "And he wasn't the only one who thought to make backups." Evelyn wasn't a straightforward ally. She had caveats and a wariness that felt like a wound. "I left those things where I thought they had a chance," she said, "but some of the places I left them have been compromised. Some of my contacts have been bought. I have enemies in places you wouldn't believe. I can help you, Emily, but I won't promise to keep you safe." The warning was honest, too honest. I realized I wanted to forgive her, to hug her, to be angry and embraced in equal measure. Instead, I inhaled, measured the air, and asked the question I'd been trying not to say aloud. "Why me? Why now?" Evelyn's eyes were tired. "Because someone found you. Because someone wanted you to follow the breadcrumbs. Because your father left a map to the truth and you stepped on it. Because sometimes the past reaches forward to the living and yanks them along. We made plans that night. Evelyn gave us copies of the tape recordings, but she kept originals. She told us where she had hidden other pieces of corroboration. We agreed to move slowly. We agreed to anonymize communications. We promised ourselves we'd be smarter than the people we were chasing. And then my apartment was violated. I don't mean the polite intrusion some of you might picture. A broken lock, a missing photo here, a few drawers opened. I mean the kind of ransacking that feels like an author trying to edit your life with a blunt knife. My curtains had been yanked. My coffee table was turned on its side. My passport was out of its envelope. My jewelry box open. My notebook splayed like dead birds. The journals, the ones we tried to protect, were ripped. Pages torn clean out and missing. The box with the storage unit papers was gone. The cassette copies were missing. 2 pieces of evidence. Physically gone. I returned from a late night errand, Alex beside me, and my key turned in the lock like a verdict. My stomach dropped before I opened the door. The smell hit me first. The metallic tang of panic and the faint sweet of corroded batteries. "Call the police," Alex said, voice hoarse. "Call Harris." I did. Detective Harris came out, same practical, world-weary demeanor, and spent an hour in my apartment taking notes in a rhythm that felt practiced. He told me not to touch anything. He asked about forced entry. No, none. He said someone had used a spare key or they had the lock pick skills. He didn't say any of the words I wanted. "We will protect you." He said instead, "We'll put an extra patrol in the neighborhood. Keep records of everything." That night, I lay awake and made lists. Who would want those tapes? Who would want my dad's papers? The obvious answer was the same name that had been a shadow over everything. Richard Hale. But why take evidence? Why not leave it and storm the person who had it with legal force? The answer was a thing that folded me inward. Because sometimes the point is to terrify. Sometimes the point is to take and leave you knowing you were violated. Evelyn sent a message the next morning. "We need to assume they know where you live. Move if you can. We can help with a new place, but you need to be off-grid for a while." Her message felt like a rope thrown to someone drowning. Tight and necessary and cold. "How are you not a flight risk yet?" Alex asked quietly over coffee. He was pacing the apartment like he could block threats physically. I wanted to tell him that for all the adrenaline and righteousness, I was human and very afraid. Instead, I said, "I can't run. Not now." He looked at me like it was ridiculous. "You can hide, Em. You can go stay with Mom." "No," I said immediately. "I can't drag her into this. Not after what she said." The memory slid forward like a shard. Sarah, folding away, giving me pieces that were safe. How could I hand her the rest and ask her to live inside the fear she'd been sparing me from? We set up precautions. Alex changed the locks himself that afternoon, using a locksmith skill he'd apparently learned as a teenager. We cleaned and took inventory. We made digital copies of whatever we could salvage, uploaded to encrypted drives under code names. We buried backups in places so dumb they might look like trash to anyone else. We made lists of who to call and who to distrust. We practiced how to answer a knock at the door. We made plans for evasion. We were earnest and terrified and clumsy about it. Evelyn called that evening. She was quieter than before. "They hit you harder than I thought," she said. "They're watching you escalate now. They took things that can point directly back to Hale. That was intentional. Someone knew you were close. Do you think they'll come after me?" The sentence left my mouth as if I weren't the one speaking it. "They will, maybe," she said, "but that isn't certain. Government and corporations operate through layers. Sometimes the enforcement is legal. Sometimes it's not. You need to assume the worst and hope for the best." "Why are you helping me?" I demanded, more harshly than I meant. Evelyn was silent for a beat. "Because I failed Michael," she said finally. "Because I thought I could cede evidence and leave. Because people I trusted turned. Because guilt is heavy and because the truth matters and because someone needs to step on the domino that my cowardice didn't push. Because if not us, who?" Her answer landed like a hand on my shoulder. It steadied and it sank at once. Night after night after that, the watching changed. It was no longer a man at the stoplight or a sedan idling. It was a sense that footsteps were nearer. Phone calls of static. Emails that only contained a single word. Stop. Once, someone tried to follow me home and retreated when Alex pulled up behind me like a guardian angel with a bicycle bell. Once, a neighbor mentioned a man in a gray coat looking at my apartment window and then denying seeing anyone. The pattern felt like a loom weaving itself into a rope, a thread of pressure, a tightening around me. But the most terrifying thing was that the missing materials weren't merely stolen. They had been chosen. Whoever had broken in didn't want every scrap. They wanted the things that would let the story breathe in public. They wanted the tapes and the storage unit copies and the names that connected to Hale. The theft felt like an attempt to suffocate evidence before it could grow lungs and shout. We had built a fragile safety net out of paper and panic. The reality settled in my chest like a new resident. I could bury this back into the ground and pretend I was safe, or I could set it free and watch the world change shape. There was no clean choice. At the trial end of the week, Alex sat across from me and said, like someone holding a fragile animal, "We go public. We leak what we have. We send to independent outlets, to journalists who don't bow to power. If we don't, they will keep taking pieces until there's nothing left. If we do, there's a chance they can't just erase it all. I thought about my mother sleeping in her neat house, extra closed off from a past she thought she was protecting me from. I thought about Michael's voice on that cassette, saying my name into static and time. I thought about Eveline's guarded face in the blue lantern and how she had admitted to leaving envelopes that had started a chain reaction. I thought about the man who'd whispered into my phone, "You're meddling. Leave it buried." And I realized something grim and bright. My father hadn't wanted this buried. He wanted the truth out. He'd tried to ensure it would survive. He had left breadcrumbs that led to me. He had, in his own way, trusted my curiosity. Trusted that I'd not let it die under floorboards and in storage units. The problem with choosing to expose something that powerful is this. Once you decide to open the window, you cannot unsee what falls through. You cannot stop the wind from changing the furniture of people's lives. We made a list, then a backup list, then a plan. We reached out to a reporter Alex trusted and asked for a meeting. We encoded the tapes and uploaded copies to servers under names that meant nothing. We mailed physical copies of documents to P.O. boxes in other states. The logistics were messy and brave and terrifying. For a small stretch, I felt like a player in a strange, high-stakes game whose rules I was only learning as I moved. And all the while, the watching continued. Sometimes in the form of the gray sedan at the stoplight. Sometimes in the form of a sullen man staring at my building. Sometimes in the form of a note tucked under my door that said nothing but had a single fingerprint smudged on it. We lived on the edge of a small war, one fought mostly in whispers and in the rewiring of ordinary life. The day we finally sent the packet to someone we trusted was the day I felt some sharp, insane mixture of terror and rightness. Terror because we were now publicly stepping into the ring. Rightness because it felt like honoring my father's work. Like answering a call he had left in a recorder with a voice and action and stubbornness. Evelyn warned us that once the truth touched daylight, it would have a life of its own. You don't control how it will land, she said. You only choose to let it see the light. The files were out. The cassettes were copied. The plan was in motion. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, not sure if the drop would be into nothingness or into the sea that would carry us home. That night, Alex stayed over. We watched bad TV and pretended we didn't both know we were living inside a wire. I lay awake and tried to imagine what would happen next. Would a knock on the door be a raid? A rescue? A pickup? Or a goodbye? I thought about my father's voice again, on tape, saying the thing that had galvanized everything. If you're hearing this, they failed to silence me, but they will try to silence you. I turned the sentence over like it was a coin, and somewhere in the dark, I decided that silence was no longer an option. You ever get to that point in life where you know whatever decision you make, you'll never go back to being the same person again? That's where I was, and it all started with the final envelope. I found it in my mailbox early on a Saturday morning. The sun wasn't even fully up. The street still quiet, except for the distant sound of a lawnmower starting too early somewhere down the block. I remember pulling the little metal door open, expecting the usual. Bills, ads, maybe a late birthday card from my aunt. But there it was, a plain envelope. Same rushed handwriting, my name across the front. My stomach dropped. I didn't even wait to get inside. I tore it open right there on the sidewalk. Inside wasn't just another cryptic note. This one was thick, stuffed full of documents, contracts, bank transfers, whistleblower testimonies typed out in shaky detail. And then the part that made my knees nearly buckle proof that Richard Hale himself had orchestrated my father's death. It wasn't even buried in layers of implication this time. It was right there. Signed orders, internal emails, directives to contain Michael Carter. The language was so cold, so calculated, it made me sick. My father hadn't just stumbled into the wrong thing. He tried to expose Hale, and Hale had killed him for it. I sat there on the curb, paper spilling onto my lap, the morning air sharp against my skin, and I knew. This was it. The truth was finally in my hands. But truth, I realized, is heavy. It doesn't just sit quietly in your pocket. It demands to be carried, and it demands you choose what to do with it. And choosing meant risking everything. The first person I showed was Alex. He came over that afternoon, and I laid it all out on the kitchen table. The contracts, the testimonies, the signatures. He didn't laugh it off this time. He didn't call me paranoid. His face drained of color as he flipped page after page. Jesus, Em, he whispered. This is career ending. No, life ending. For him. And for you if you're not careful. I can't just sit on it, I said, my voice cracking. My dad died for this. Alex looked at me with that stubborn determination he'd always had, even when we were kids. Then we publish it. We go to the paper, blow it wide open. I wanted to believe it would be that easy, but deep down, I knew the watchers wouldn't just let me walk into a newsroom with a manila folder. And sure enough, that night, they reminded me. I came home from running errands to find my apartment door ajar. My heart stopped. Inside, the place was a war zone. Couch cushions slashed open, drawers dumped, papers scattered everywhere. My laptop gone. The box of files I'd hidden in my closet, emptied. They'd taken almost everything. Almost. Because the final envelope, the one I'd tucked under a loose tile on the bathroom floor, was still there. Untouched. That was when it really hit me. They weren't just watching. They were inside my life now, and they weren't subtle anymore. I locked myself in the bathroom, clutching the papers against my chest, and cried. Not just from fear, from anger, from exhaustion, from the crushing weight of knowing I was running out of time. And that's when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I had to. A woman's voice came through the line, calm but urgent. Emily Carter? Who is this? My name is Evelyn Ross. I used to work for Hale Dynamics, and if you want the truth, I think it's time we meet. We met in a quiet coffee shop downtown. She was older than I expected. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Silver hair pulled into a neat bun, eyes sharp but tired. I was the one who left you the envelopes, she admitted, stirring her coffee without drinking it. I worked under Richard Hale for over 20 years. I saw what he did, what your father tried to stop. Why now? I asked. Why come to me? Because your father trusted me once, she said softly. And I failed him. I thought I could help from the inside, but I was too scared. And when they killed him, I couldn't live with myself. I've been gathering what I could ever since, waiting for the right moment. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt seen, but there was something about her that made me hesitate. Her words were careful, rehearsed. Her hand never shook, even as she spoke about betrayal and death. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But after everything, I couldn't tell if she was here to help me or to push me exactly where Hale wanted me. Then there was Daniel. He showed up 2 nights later, pounding on my door like a man possessed. When I opened it, his face was pale, eyes bloodshot. We need to talk, he said. I almost slammed the door in his face, but something in his voice stopped me. I let him in, and that's when the dam finally broke. I knew your father, he confessed. I worked with him, protected him even. At least I was supposed to. My chest tightened. Supposed to? Daniel sank into a chair, hands covering his face. I betrayed him. Not directly, I didn't pull the trigger, but I gave Hale the opening. I fed him information. Thought I was keeping myself alive. Thought I could play both sides, and it cost your father his life. The silence after that was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to throw him out, to claw at his face for daring to sit here and admit that to me. But all I could do was whisper, why are you here now? Because I can't undo what I did, he said, his voice breaking. But I can try to protect you. You're the last piece of him left, and I won't let them take you too. So there I was. Evelyn urging me to go public. Daniel warning me it would get me killed. Alex standing by me, ready to fight no matter what. And me, caught in the middle. Then came the confrontation. It happened fast. Too fast. One moment, I was leaving Alex's place with the envelope hidden under my jacket. The next, I was cornered in the alley behind my car. 2 men stepped out of the shadows, the kind who looked more like soldiers than thugs. Give us the papers, one demanded. Before I could answer, Daniel appeared, gun drawn. She's not going anywhere with you. The alley erupted into chaos. Shouts, struggles. My heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. Somehow, in the madness, I ran. Clutching the envelope, I bolted through the streets, past honking cars and startled pedestrians until I found myself in Alex's newsroom. And right there, in front of a dozen reporters and editors, I threw the papers onto the desk and shouted, print it, all of it, the world deserves to know. The fallout was immediate. Headlines exploded within 24 hours. Richard Hale exposed. Government contracts frozen. Investigations launched. Whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork. My father's name, Michael Carter, finally cleared. Me? I didn't feel victorious. Not really. I felt empty. Like I'd burned my whole life down just to light the truth. But when I stood at his grave a week later, watching the news crews hound Hale's mansion on my phone, I finally let myself breathe. I did it, Dad, I whispered. They'll never erase you again. Do I think it's over? No. The Watchers are still out there. Hale may fall, but men like him have backups, shadows that slither into the spaces power leaves behind. But I'm not the same scared girl who found that first envelope. I carry my father's legacy now, his fight, his truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Because the Watchers may still be watching. But for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.